Cut 50 is fighting alongside those most impacted to ensure that they are seen as human beings to be treated with dignity and respect. We're fighting to remind us all that transformation is possible, that we can win. This weekend alone, as Van mentioned, 2,200 incarcerated people returned to their families and communities. And this, I believe, was the first thing that Cut 50 did, was pass the First Step Act. So if this is their first thing, I can only imagine what amazing, phenomenal things that they are going to do. Their goal is to cut the prison population in half and crime in half, and something tells me that you will not stop even when that goal is reached. So we're ever so lucky to get to hear from them today and to have this discussion with these panelists. So I'm going to warm up the panel by asking you a rapid-fire question. What is one thing that people in this room should know about our criminal legal system and its impacts that they might not know? And I'll start with Louis, and then I'll go this way.
Sure. So I think that people should know that the most powerful person in the courtroom, I should say, is not the judge. The most powerful person in the courtroom is the prosecutor. The prosecutor controls the charges while the judge controls the actual sentence. So that's my vantage point.
I think people in this room should know that the issue of mass incarceration is much more than just the 2.3 million who are incarcerated or the 4.6 who are on correctional supervision. A recent study actually showed that 1 out of every 2 adults has a loved one who's in prison. This is an issue that's costing hundreds of billions of dollars a year that could be going into our schools, that could be going into our neighborhoods, that could be actually addressing issues like mental health and addiction, and preventing crime. So this is an issue that impacts all of us, some of us very closely.
2 things. One is that 2.3 million number. That means nothing to most people. Let me put it in perspective. 2.3 million people locked up is the biggest prison population in the history of the world. There has never been a country in the history of the world with 2.3 million people locked up. And if we win and we cut it in half and you only have 1.2 or 1.1, it's still the biggest prison population in the history of the world. That's how over-incarcerated we are. China has 1 billion people. We only have 300 million. China, with 1 billion people, has 1 million people locked up. We could cut our prison population in half and still have more people locked up than China. The other thing is, with that 4.3 million who are caught up on probation and parole, that group of people, twice as many people, can go back to prison at any point for not committing a crime. A nun could not survive on probation or parole because you can go back to prison for being 10 minutes late to a meeting with your probation officer. You can go back to prison for going to the one neighborhood over to check on your aunt who just had a stroke, if that's not the right neighborhood for you to be in. You can go back to prison for not committing crimes. What does that mean? That means when you came home from prison, it was hard to get a job, it's hard to get an apartment, hard to get your kids back out of foster care. You did all those things, you're 10 minutes late for a meeting, you go back to prison for 3 months, you lose your job, you lose your apartment, you lose your kids back in foster care, and you have to start all over again. So mass supervision, twice as many people as mass incarceration. So this is a massive, massive problem.